if a black person calls a white person a cracker, we know what that means. White people aren't going around saying cracker this, cracker that, hugging each other up and that. Like, that's just not a thing.
I really don't have any comeback to that. That is true.
The silence was good because that was good. There was no. That one had to set in the air for a little bit.
If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson.
I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Wilana.
And I'm Amisha Cross.
Fat Joe came out and said he uses the N-word because he's black. And so we want to have a conversation. When is it okay to use the N-word if you're not black? Is it okay for black people to use the N-word? Is it okay for others to use the N-word? Let's have an honest conversation.
I thought we were trying to figure out if Fat Joe was black.
I was about to say, I never knew if Fat Joe was actually black.
Oh, well,
is he just one of those people
know.
who's claiming to be black?
No.
Secondary question.
Well, look, that's what I hear he's trying to claim.
Fat Joe's mama and daddy.
So you vote black.
They selectively claim, though.
Yeah. Today you would. So you say he's black.
I would say this though. At that point, it's not monolithic. Like black folks are told monolithically that they're black, and so there's no choice. And so. It's not that they choose, it's that some of them identify a certain way and others are the opposite.
But my question is he Afro-Latino, which actually exists, or is he just Latino? Because there are Cubans who definitely aren't black.
Some people dispute Afro-Latino. Some people dispute that altogether. Like that's a conversation in itself. That's why I was just making sure with Rob.
Well, most Afro-Latinos just want to be Latino. So I'm like, whatever. Whatever box you want to check.
So let's say the box, is it okay for them to use the N-word in those boxes? If they say that.
I'm going to go ahead and veto him on using the N-word.
Is that veto everybody?
I'll take the exact opposite position. I say anybody who wants to use the N-word based on the way society is right now, anybody who wants to use it, who uses it without malice, then I'm not tripping. Like basically, and I have a problem with black folks that use it with malice. Like I don't give black folks a pass if they're calling me a stupid N-word.
So Eminem, who is one of my favorite rappers, by the way.
In fact, I've made this point.
N-word.
I'm good with it. And in fact, my I've had this position for about 20 years. And the examples I used to give was if Clarence Thomas calls me an N-word, then we're going to fight. But if Eminem does or Fat Joe does, it's like, all right, what's up, man? Like, and that's it. Because to me, it's more about what you're trying to say than it is what the words you're using. And
I take an entirely different approach. On a personal level, I feel like if we are going to say that the N-word it's constituted as a fighting word, if we're going to say the N-word is a word that should not be colloquially used because of its history and all of this, then it cannot be taken back to be used in any other way. It's kind of like when girlfriends call each other the B word. You call me the B word. Me and you could go way back to third grade. I'm still ready to clock a shit.
It's a problem.
Like that's not
what we're doing. Core belief, I'm completely with. Like that's my thing. Like, look,
you're saying across the board, black people, white people, everybody.
I'm saying I'm saying that if it's gonna be a bad word, then don't let anybody say it.
Word, then nobody says it. You don't take it back and make it cool and fun for some groups, but not everybody else.
I'm with that. I'm saying it's one or the other. Like actually, what you're saying there, I'm 100% with. Like I think you don't take back the power of the word if you say I can use it, but if you use it, I'm going to have a fit. Like, I'm actually power then.
I'm actually have a different view. I'm going to have the Ta-Nehisi Coates view. Like I think no, should you go around saying the N-word all the time? No. However, I think, others who are not black, particularly white people, I think you have to, there's a certain sensitivity there. And then there has to be an understanding of the context of words. Words have no meaning without context. So sometimes groups do, like women do go back in there and forth and call each other B, and they can have it in their own endearing terms. But if I come in as a man, men have different types of privilege. And I say, oh yeah, I want to participate in this conversation and call you a B, right? If my girlfriend sees me, I says, but another woman says, oh, hey, hi, honey. Like out of context, why is she calling you honey? Yes.
She could be a nice Southern woman.
Yo, man. That's the most mental gymnastics nonsense I've ever heard.
No. Here's the other part of it. Love, for this last point. Here it is. Like, if you as a white person feel this type of injustice, so my cameraman, who happens to be white, said I could share this story, so I'm going to share it. He's from a small he's from a small town here in Ohio. Didn't grow up around a lot of black people. Is that pretty correct, John?
That's correct.
All right. So he listened. He didn't listen to a lot of rap, but he eventually started listening to rap when he got a little bit older, and didn't have a lot of black friends. But some of his other friends had black friends. So first time he's hanging around black friends, they're all hearing saying the music, and then he says the music and he says N-word, and then the black guy, of course, he got his first lesson in black people, like at least some black people, maybe not James, but they got offended.
Well, hold up. I'm sure that's true. That's not my point is that just like we think some white people are very arbitrary in the way they do things and the way they apply stuff, or that some women are arbitrary or men are arbitrary. I'm saying that's arbitrary. That doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're going to say it and say that, hey, this is a term of endearment, yada, 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 it doesn't make sense. Again, my point is it doesn't make sense to say that a black person can say that to me in malice, like really trying to demean me. And that's cool. But if a white person says that, trying to dap me up, trying to show me love,
or if they're singing a rap song along with everybody else, because if our whole deal is we don't want this because it's malicious.
The N-words in Paris, like you say, so if they sing that and then the crowd just has to be quiet, like, nah, you're gonna commercialize it. Then, and I mean, and the word does slide off your tongue, I get why rappers are using it all the time. Like it rhymes with a lot of stuff, so, but then don't tell me that somebody showing me love, trying to say that Fat Joe saying it is terrible. It's an affront on black folks, and Clarence Thomas saying it is all good business.
But like everybody didn't make the choice for it to be globalized and sensationalized. So in the context, look, if you're a white person and you feel like you should be able to say these words no matter what, I mean, it's one right.
There isn't an equivalent in another culture. So where, it has that type of history, it has a negative connotation, then you take it back and all of a sudden now where it's the sound of brotherly love. If a black person calls a white person a cracker, we know what that means. White people aren't going around saying cracker this, cracker that, hugging each other up and that. Like, that's just not a thing.
I really don't have any comeback to that. That is true.
The silence was good because that was good. There was that one had to set in the air for a little bit.
I mean, it is a true statement, right?
That's true, because we're the only group that calls ourselves by the derogatory term.
Yeah. And then tells other people, no, when we do it, it's cool. Like, and honestly, I think that it's an attempt at a power play. It's like, oh, you guys got all these privileges, so we got one and you tripping. And like, you know what? I'm not saying that white people have the right to say it. I'm saying, hey, as black people, we shouldn't have arbitrary stuff like that. We're halfway denigrating ourselves by saying, oh, when I say it, I couldn't oppress you. So they're like, yo, are you saying that this white person is better than you? And that's why he can't say it, but you can? Like, that's a slippery slope when you start getting into why it's okay for black people to say it. Again, it's okay for black people to say it with like vitriol, but it's not okay for somebody who's not coming at you with vitriol to say it. Like you're in a real slippery slope there, and that's what I can't endorse. I'm not saying white people should have the right to say it. I'm saying black folks, let's make up our mind. Like either it's bad and it should be out of the language, which I would personally subscribe to, or it's not a big deal and we're just not going to make it a big deal unless if a cop says it to me trying to put me down, then we got a problem. If a black dude says it to me like I'm a stupid N-word, we got a problem.
So James, you're okay, and your reasoning makes sense. So what about this the Crazy 88? So the Asian culture is now really big into hip hop. It's a global thing now, and so there was a
that work.
Yeah, right. It was an Asian artist. I think his name is Rich Brain. I think that's his artist name. But he said the N-word initially, got big off of it, and then offended a bunch of people. But you're saying, following your reasoning, kind of James, you're thinking like, okay, people shouldn't be offended because he's just adopting the culture of hip hop.
I'm not saying people shouldn't be offended.
Okay.
People are going to be offended.
I'm asking, but from your point of view, he's adopting hip hop culture.
I'm saying it's nonsensical. I'm not saying I'm saying it doesn't make sense. Like people do stuff that doesn't make sense all the time. Like the world goes round and round on people doing stuff that doesn't make sense.
But is he adopting hip hop culture, or is he adopting the negative connotations that blacks have always had? Because my thing is, this isn't a hip hop culture issue. This word predated all of hip hop.
Yeah, but it's such a prominent word in hip hop.
Not changing situation.
But it's such a prominent word in hip hop. You can't, like, literally, this was a thing with the Kanye and Jay song, N-words in Paradise or Paris, excuse me. And like
great song,
the celebrities, what was it?
Gwyneth
Paltrow's out there saying it. And people are like, "Oh, I can't believe Gwyneth Paltrow sung the lyrics to sung the words to the hook."
These are the same hip hop people who like to call black women B's and H's all day and all the time. And
so then maybe we shouldn't. Maybe
maybe
we shouldn't let them dictate what's okay.
Period. That's
I'm
with
you.
Like, if it's a hip hop language, it probably isn't language that you should be using on a daily basis,
right?
Or having it as a regular.
But Ta-Nehisi Coates is not hip hop though. Ta-Nehisi Coates trying to give me some mental gymnastics on why it's cool and in some cases and not cool in other cases. Is not hip hop doing that. I'm saying there are black intellectuals, black folks who are very thoughtful.
Think are intellectually a little bit lost because you can walk. You can walk
people that I respect that have this. I think it's. I mean, no. I think that it's something people want to have, and so they figure out a way to make it make sense to them. I don't either.
That word was used right before people got lynched. It was used right before people got burnt. It was used right before crosses were burnt in yards. It was used right before bombs were thrown in people's houses. I'm good on the N-word.
No, you're absolutely right.
All that. And honestly, like, and I'll ride with you if you say, we're going to take the power back out of it, or take the power back from it. But if you're going to say that, then part of taking that power means that you don't flip out anytime somebody else says it. Like, if you flip out every time somebody says it, then it clearly you don't have the power. So it's one or the other to me.
So why do you think go ahead to the 2 days? Like, why do you?
I feel like what you say reminds me of a thought I had recently. I overheard someone just recently, I'm talking like 2-3 years ago, that I really had thought of as a very close person to me. I overheard them use the N-word in dealing with, in referencing me. And I heard a lot.
Wait.
But was he saying you were his favorite person, or was he trying to denigrate you?
No, it was not in a good way. That's my point.
That should be bad no matter who's doing it.
What I'm saying is, to the point you just made,
what was the context like? What was the context?
What's the...
It was just that I called him and he thought he hung up the phone, but he actually didn't. He hit and he said that F and N, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah. There's no way to misinterpret that. That sounds pretty malicious.
I
took your word on it. It's bad. Like,
it hurt me. I mean, I was very hurt.
Sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but damn, go ahead.
No, but the thing that Amisha said that I was thinking of was, that was just said, was about the power part, because as I thought through it, I was more sad for him. And it made me realize how I've matured as just an adult, I guess, from when I was a kid. Because I used to get real hurt and offended and mad at people when I heard that when I was younger. When I hear it now, it's more like, damn, I feel sorry for you. You look at the world like that. Like, you got to use those words and look at people like that. So I think you're right that there's a certain, there's a certain empowerment in just not letting it bother you anymore, but you kind of got to get there in a certain way on your own. I'm not saying everybody listening to this, just don't worry about it. If someone uses the word, you shouldn't be upset. But I wanted to chime in from my own personal experience, because I feel like I've got a little bit of a unique experience in my life with this. Number one is I'm mixed. My mom's from Europe. My dad's from Nigeria in Africa. So if you look at me, people have asked me, well, what do you consider yourself, Tunde? And I've learned to kind of say, well, I consider myself a human being, but in America, I'm Black. Because if you look at reality, I'm 50% white, I'm 50% Black genetically. I don't look like a Nigerian. My father's dark skinned, he's got different facial features, and I don't look like my mom. I look like a mix right in between both of them. But in the United States culture, I'm 100% Black. And I embrace it, I love it, but it's just that our country is unique like that, because I lived in Australia for almost 5 years. And that taught me a lot there too, because they don't look at Black the same way we look at it. And then I moved to Florida afterwards, and I've been down here for 21 years. And it's interesting dealing with the Caribbean culture, because I'm from Washington, D.C., where it was more white and Black when I grew up, in American way of white and Black. But down here, I met a lot of Jamaicans, Haitians, people from the smaller islands like Curacao that tell me I didn't know I was Black till I got to the US. Because just in certain other cultures, they don't make a big deal about race.
Well, they're also homogenous. So if you're in one of those islands and there aren't too many other people that like look differently from you, then it's a whole lot easier to not see.
But also, but it's a little bit deeper than that, because I feel like, because people have asked me, oh, well, how did you get treated in Australia and all this stuff? And I'm like, I was treated pretty fine. Like,
Australia didn't have slavery, though, did it? I'd be like...
No, but what I'm saying
they didn't necessarily treat the Aborigines very well.
Well, that's a good point. So
here's what I want to get at. I don't want to get too into weeds with all. I mean, obviously, I want to stay focused on the subject at hand. The point I tell people is there's a different thing in the strand of American DNA of the culture, where, like you said about the homogenous thing in the islands, I think it's less about that. In America, from the time of slavery, right? Because they had to make sure they had a rule about who could be a slave, and I guess you couldn't. So we had the 1/8 rule. If you had 1/8 of black blood in you, you were considered 100% black. So that's where in certain other countries, and this was a culture shock to me moving to Florida. I wasn't used to this. People would approach me and think I'm Hispanic. They would talk Spanish to me. I was like, dude, I don't look Hispanic. But the first time I went to Puerto Rico, I understood why then they thought I was Hispanic.
Yeah.
Tunde, even down here, that's the first thing I realized when I came down here. Like, it's people much darker than me that if I walk up to them like, what's up, man? They're like, they'll say, hola, you know, like, I'm like, oh, right. Word.
Like, still black, though.
They're still black.
But just more so the American culture aspect, where skin tone, to me, growing up in Cincinnati and then coming to Florida, you know, I was in DC for 7 years and then coming down, like skin tone, like anybody who looked like me or darker, you know, I expected them to have a similar life experience than me and perceive things the same as I did. But when I came down here, it's totally different. Completely, you know, like it's like, but no matter how light or dark you are, like it's
right. But actually, I want to go to a different point on that you said on that too, though, because you make this point, Tunde, that yes, we view it differently, particularly in South Florida, which is like being in almost another country in a way because there's so many cultures. It just is. But I will also say that there is some there are also people that adopt that culture, because I think there are also people that are blacker than anybody here that say they don't want to ever be identified as black. They'll be identified as white first before they'll be identified as black or Latino first. That's also a problem too.
The defining characteristic of black, though, in America is the villain. Like that, it's always been cast. That's why when the Irish come over, you know, and they're not considered white, they're like, oh, we got to get over here. That's why when the Italians come over and they're like, oh, those guys aren't white. Oh no, we got to get over here to the white people, because it's always cast against, you know, like you're either going to be white or you're going to be black. That's why now the Hispanics are being hit with that. You know, when they took them off, you know, Latinos no longer on the census. Like you either have a white Latino or you have to select black, and not a lot of them are going to select black if you see how black people are treated. You know, so that and I do want to make this point clear though from before, just before I lose it, is I'm not saying that what people should and shouldn't be offended by. You know, like my real point is only that the mental or the logical consistency. It doesn't make sense to say that I can say it, but you can't say it. Like if the word is bad, if the word is demeaning and it's used in a demeaning way, it's the same to me, whether it's a black person. A black person can offend me with the N-word just like a white person can. A white person isn't above the black person. They can hurt me more. You know, like that's just not how I look at the world. Like,
people, no, that's fair. That's fair.
But if you're attacking me with it, then we got a problem. If you're not attacking me with it, then we don't.
I get that point, but you can see I think the other side of the argument is that, you know, there's a history in this country of white people using that word in such a violent, horrible way that when it's used at all, some people just have a visceral reaction to it. So no matter what,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
I mean, so no matter what, but if you carry that with you,
that's a heavy burden. You know, every white person you see, you're feeling like that's the same person.
Everyone but you may be.
If they use the word,
exactly.
Not every white person I see, but if it is uttered out of your mouth, then yes. Because it is genuine. It is known.
If it's uttered out of their mouth in a positive way, in a way to show you love, then you're like,
there's no way. Like you don't say chinks, you don't say spick, you don't say all of these other words that have been used to denigrate other.
But black people do. Those other cultures don't do that either. But black people do take that word and use it in a positive way. Is my point.
That is an inherent problem with us.
Yeah.
But that comes back to Rob's comment about the B word between women versus us as guys coming in and using it. I mean, I think that the N word in the United States primarily has a certain cultural context that you're right. It's one of those weird caveats that a certain group uses it and no one else really can use it without being somewhat offensive. And what I learned, I don't want to say I learned, maybe what I developed in my thought process might be a better way to put it. When I was younger and I lived in Australia, what I kind of started feeling was being a Black American and Black in America is really a cultural thing more than a racial thing. And I think that that's where some of these things like the Fat Joe stuff and all that, as our country becomes a little bit more diverse in terms of the other minority groups coming in here, we're going to start seeing these issues come up a little bit more, because I remember being at some interesting issue. You mentioned the Aborigines.
That's funny. That's actually Fat Joe's point, by the way, really quick, while you're on that. That's Fat Joe's point, that he grew up in a Black neighborhood around Black people. He was in part that's his argument for using the word. So
let me finish here, because the thing is that I didn't. Yeah, well, you keep interrupting me. But my point was that this is going to sound funny, but I didn't think of Aboriginals as Black. Just like I didn't think of dark-skinned people from India as Black, because in my mind, as a kid from Washington, D.C., Black people were Black Americans. People, hip hop, the culture I came from, and those guys were Indian or Aboriginal. They just weren't Black to me.
Well, Black American is a different culture. I think that's different than
what I'm saying. Even though technically they were darker,
it's also a different race. It's a different race too, though. It's a different cultural heritage. But
that's my point, saying that from an optics, right, they were darker skinned than me. So it's kind of crazy to hear myself say, oh, they weren't Black. But from a cultural standpoint, I didn't just feel that connection with them. It's like, all right, they're not Black, there's something else. And I feel like growing up, even in DC with some of the Hispanic kids and all that, when they assimilated with Black culture, it was like that's their part of their family. So when a guy like
Fat Joe gets a pass.
Was that?
So you vote yes, Fat Joe gets a pass.
Yeah, I mean, that's my point. And it goes back to kind of Jimmy's point about is it derogatory as a part of the family being used or not? And
Misha's like, no, he don't get a pass. Misha looks like she's having different.
And since when is really long the person?
You can't agree with both of us, man. You can't agree with both of us.
We had totally opposing points.
But here's the thing. That's why this word, our culture in America is very unique,
Professor
right?
Tunde.
I use like Misha, I do not use that word myself. I think it's offensive, derogatory, all that. I listen to a lot of hip hop where guys use it all the time. So in a way, I'm hypocritical. I can acknowledge that. And that's what I'm saying. This word in America is the one word that's a very unique word. That
you went everywhere with that
people
point.
Just make it more complicated than it needs to be. The B word is not a good comp, because you go around certain groups of women and they call each other that, and they're fine if you call them that, as long as you're not saying it like a way to denigrate them.
Right.
And then other women, they don't say it amongst themselves, and they don't want you to say it. So that doesn't play across, like consistently with all types of women. That's not something that every woman, if they say it, they're fine with, or they're not.
Consistently across all types of Black people either.
Exactly. People want it both ways. That's my point. People want it both ways. They want to say, okay, I want to control this. I want to exercise domain over this. And that's what it's all about. That's what all this is talking about is I want to have control over this word. And I don't care if my logic makes sense. I don't care if I'm denigrating my own people. I'm going to control this.
To challenge that point, though, how much does the majority culture have control over 99% of everything else? And so
that's my point. You just want, you say, oh, they have all this stuff. I want to have something for myself. And if that's what we're doing, then we're losing. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to take stuff for ourselves and actually have it for ourselves.
I agree with that.
If we take it for ourselves, but if we take it for ourselves and they use it, then we're not flipping out. We're not, oh, I can't believe you did that. Like, particularly, again,
I'll tell you what about this? Every time they use it, hey, wait, I have an idea. Every time they use it, they can pay a tax on reparations. Let's do that. There we go. I'm cool. That's really taking it back.
You make it actually bigger than it really is. Like, you make it a thing that people like Chappelle's does skits on this. Like, oh, like, ooh, can we say it? Like, oh, like you make it because it's so taboo now. It's like, look, if it's a bad thing, then let's not say it. If it doesn't matter, then let's not trip unless somebody insults us with it. And it's one or the other, though. It's one or the other. Like, I don't understand why it's going to be a bad thing. Only if, and it's a bad thing if a white dude says it in a way to show me love. Like, what's up? This is how people talk in hip hop culture. If Eminem says it, it's the way he's Calvin Candy if he says it. And if Clarence Thomas does, then he's just my dude. And it's like, nah, that's not how it works. Like, it matters with all words. You say words need to have context. With all words, it matters what the intent, what the expression is trying to get across. And that's what I see more than anything. What's the expression is trying to get across? Is it to insult, or is it to show love, or is it indifferent? Fat Joe can say it if he's saying "What's up, my N-word," and he can't say it if he says, "Hey, get that stupid N-word out of here." I'm like, how is he saying it?
So, but let's not say it's Fat Joe. Say it's like, because I recently watched this podcast interview of Aaron Carter, Nick Carter's little brother from like Backstreet Boys. Anyhow, Aaron Carter has now decided that he is a hip hop guy. And he was explaining how this happened to him and how he's down with the culture and how this is his thing now. And he basically described it as, you know, him having a lot of B's, H's, getting into fights, the different types of drugs he uses, and feeling comfortable using that word. And I was like, is this how people outside of Black culture view Black people or the culture in and of itself? And now they're okay using this word or adapting some things or adopting some things from the culture because this is their view of Black people broadly.
Right. Everybody wants to be
That's
Black.
my issue there.
Right. Everybody wants to be.
That's a problem.
Look. Everybody
that's
wants
how
to
we present, or that's how some of us present ourselves.
Well, look, I'll say this. You're right. But look, everybody wants to be Black until the police comes. Then they change. I bet Nick Jonas. Who was it? Nick Jonas. Whoever he.
Or until they can't get a home loan, or
Yes,
until
exactly.
they can't get a job.
What'd you say?
I said, is that when I claim 50% white? When the
I
cops show up?
don't know, man. You got to claim however you claim, brother. All I know is that. all right, man. Oh, well. All I know as we conclude this, you better be careful if you use that word. You're going to offend somebody. You might not offend James. You might not offend me. Amisha might get with you. I don't know what Tunde would do. We still haven't decided yet. But
Tunde
anyway.
agrees with everybody, man. He agrees with everybody.
Yes,
I'll write you an email about how I felt like you said it.
Until next
Tune
time.
in for the next 3-hour segment for Tunde's feelings on this.
I'm going to write a PhD about it.
I'm sure you will. But we're going to do that next time. But until then, I'm Rob Richardson.
I'm James Keys.
I'm PhD.
And I'm Amisha Croft.
And we'll see you next time.